Right. Hi, everybody. I'm here with Yasmine Gray, and we're going to be talking recruiter enablement, which is not a surprise for you on this channel. Yasmine, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today. Who are you and what do you do?
Yep, so I'm Yasmine. I'm a senior talent sourcer at Remote. We essentially make it a little bit more simple to hire people on a global scale. So the whole thing that we do is make employment opportunities available to more people, regardless of what country they happen to be born in or currently in. And I'm our talent sourcer, so I'm outreaching to people that we'd like to interview.
Right. Okay. So enablement in a remote, your company is a remote business, right? So the workforce is spread all over the place. Presumably enablement generally for everything is important before we come on to recruiter enablement, but there's ways that the company's organized, right, to support a remote business.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're in over 75 different countries internally. We work in over 100, so there's a lot of parts of the world to cover. So as a whole company, we work asynchronously or async. So the focus is on documentation and self-serve enablement. So you don't really want to be waiting, if you're in the UK, for someone in San Francisco to log in to answer a question to start your work. You need that answer already available. So you document everything that you can, obviously using tools like we use Notion, and then we have other ticketing tools and things. Basically, you want to reduce the need to ask those basic questions and need meetings and like time in sync to be able to talk to each other to do work.
Yes. Your company has a policy around meetings, or it has a culture around meetings. Could you just describe that? Because it's quite interesting for people.
Yeah, so you should avoid a meeting. If you have a meeting, it needs to have an agenda. And we are perfectly encouraged to reject a meeting invite if there's no agenda attached and say, I'll reconsider when you add an agenda. And the focus is more around recapping conversations that have been happening in, say, a Notion page, and making sure that like different people are heard if there are concerns to be heard. You record that meeting, so anybody that can't attend, whether it be time zone or just it doesn't work for them that day to attend, can still see the full impact of the meeting. And you should focus really on calls being about connection. So having a social activity and just having time to bond as a team rather than like arguing about a particular technical work issue.
Yeah. Okay. So on the recruitment specific sort of angle, tell us about some of the ways that your company's approach kind of has moved into like recruiter enablement. Maybe any of the things that you've done that you've thought has been particularly useful, and or anything that you think that we should be thinking about in talent acquisition more generally in this area.
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of the internal documentation, obviously because we work async and it's a part of every team to be documenting everything, it makes the hiring kickoff and the collaboration with a hiring manager a lot more already self-serve. Like you don't need to sell to a hiring manager to check the documentation because it's part of every day of every piece of work that they do. So we have literally a hiring page that details the entire hiring process and has like toggles to show you the different details, and it will tag to say this is relevant to the hiring manager, this is relevant to the recruiter. So if the hiring manager is thinking, I've just interviewed someone, I've put the scorecard in, what happens next? They don't have to wait for the recruiter to come off a call or log in to ask that question. They go in, they click the recruiter button, and they can see what the instructions are for a recruiter. So obviously for onboarding, for any person that has been promoted or brought on as a hiring manager, they don't need to wait for someone to tell them how to do it and wait months to just get used to the hiring process. It's all documented. They can just check it at any point. They can literally, in an interview, because our compensation documentation as well is documented, you can be on a call with someone that says, I actually want to move to this country. What would my salary be there? We can find that live on the call because it's all documented. So you don't have to say, I'll have to come back to you, possibly forget to reply. All of that process just becomes a lot smoother and a lot less frustrating as an individual, because like I'm really impulsive. I just want to get the answer and get the email off my to-do list. I don't want to forget about it. And I can just go into a document and find it, even if it's not a question that I have the answer to usually. Some of it's public and it will say, this is fine to share with a candidate, this is not, that kind of thing. So even when you don't know what you're doing, you can work it out.
I mean, your company is set up in this way, and it kind of relies on these types of processes. Do you think there's any reason why other companies shouldn't be just taking on board these processes anyway? Because it sounds like it makes life better for everybody, and better expectations managed, and self-serve. And do you think there's any reason why other companies, whether they're remote first or they're not, shouldn't just be doing this?
I don't think there's any reason that they shouldn't. I think, yeah, if you're in an office, if you have 2 offices in 2 different parts of London or something, regardless if it's hybrid, remote, it all works. At Remote, we believe that true remote working, not forced work from home, is the async aspect, because it means that if someone's in the office and someone's at home, they're getting the same opportunity to contribute, promote, that kind of thing. So I don't think there's any reason why every company shouldn't be doing it. I think the reason that they're not is it's really hard, because every single person has to own the fact that they have to document what they're doing. And if everybody's not on board, or say you're a company that's 1,000 employees and you don't have this, to get to the point that you do have it and it works really well is going to be a really difficult process. You're going to need like a whole team in charge of project managing that, I imagine. So it's easy when everybody's on board with it. And we have conversations in Slack where someone asks a question that hasn't been documented, or we can't find the documentation, and then the immediate question when you've answered the question is, have you put this into the documentation? So it's very ingrained in our day-to-day, so you need a whole team to be on board with that. And if they're already struggling with workload, it's a big project. So that's my feeling of what happen.
Yeah, what this also means, is if you were to leave your job and go and work somewhere else, somebody could probably come into your job and they've got a pretty good hand over there. They've got a roadmap for how to do the job. Would that be right?
Yep. Yeah, our handover is literally just a bunch of topics that link to the already existing pages to go through. So your first week of onboarding as a team is just reading documentation.
Gosh, and on another one of these interviews I did last week, I mean, there was somebody who's been in recruitment for a long time who said in the 12 roles he's had in talent acquisition, he's been thrown in at the deep end every time, and he's had to reinvent the wheel, start everything from the beginning again. So one other thing is a slightly tangential, but I think people will find it interesting. I mean, when you are reaching out to potential candidates, of course, a remote by choice organization is not going to be for everybody. So, what do you do? Do you have to pitch it and sell it to them, or are you looking for people that are choosing to they already want to work in that way? Or what's the initial outreach and candidate conversation like? Because it's not for everybody, but it'll be a dream for others.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we use Notion. Notion has the ability that you can make some pages public, some private. So we have a public handbook, and in that handbook we have some of our people policies public, the fact that we work async and our explanation of how and why that works. Our engineering team has its own handbook or rulebook that's published publicly. So the process, the initial outreach is essentially trying to get them interested enough to check that handbook. And then that's the other half, is that it's candidate enablement, because sometimes people reply and say, I'm not really interested. And I'll say, not a problem. Here's our handbook if you ever want to check it out. And, you can get back in touch with me at any point. Sometimes people come back and say, okay, I've read your handbook. Can I have a conversation, or can I ask these questions? So the initial outreach is really about, if they want to, they can engage with that handbook and they can see for themselves and self-select in or out. Do I feel like I would belong in that role and in that company and in that team? I think there's a lot of people that are sick of meetings. So even if they're not strictly remote keen, they are no meetings keen. So that generally can start a conversation as well. There's a lot of people frustrated with meetings taking up their day. So that usually catches their eye as well.
Oh, especially in the tech industry that you're in, so many meetings. That's really fascinating. And you said something that nobody said on any of these interviews I've done, which is candidate enablement. And I think about recruitment in the context of like it's a sales and marketing type of thing. And I know that in sales and marketing, there's been progressively more of a push towards allowing buyers to take self-directed journeys and for them to learn in their own pace, using the assets and formats that they prefer. So there is a video, there's also a document, there's also a and I really love the way that you've expressed that as candidate enablement. So that's something we'll probably need to think about and maybe talk about a little bit more at some point. But Yasmine, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join me. This has been a really interesting short interview, and hopefully we'll get to talk about it again sometime.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun to chat.
Great. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.